do me a favor. I'd like you to go to soberfriendspod.com, go to the bottom, put in your email address, and get on our newsletter mailing list. What I'm doing there is I'm writing an article each week, loosely based on what we talked about on the podcast, but not a recap of the podcast. Some people like to read, some people like to listen, and this is a way of extending your sobriety and stay connected to us. And from time to time, we'll survey a little bit about you so that we give to you the podcast that you're looking for, the message that you're looking for. Soberfriendspod.com, where you can get on our mailing list and stay connected to the show. I'm Matt.
Hey, I'm Steve.
Hey, I'm John.
This is the Sober Friends Podcast. We're here for the sober curious, the new guy, and the old timer. We're here to talk about the stuff anyone looking to live alcohol-free has to face day to day, and how we overcame those struggles. We speak for no 12-step group, but we do try to remain anonymous. You're not alone. This is the Sober Friends Podcast. There's a lot of wisdom that I hear when I'm at meetings, and recently in my Monday night meeting, I heard something that hit me square between the eyes, and I think it's one of those things that you're going to really connect with too. A lady came in. She's new to our meeting. I haven't met her before, and when she shared, it was something incredible. She talked about how she was always waiting for when this one thing happened, then she could let her guard down. Then she would be happy. She talked about always looking and working towards that perfect job. If I get that perfect job and the right paycheck, then I'll be happy. If I get the relationship I always wanted, then I'll be happy. What she realized after the fact is what she was in was survival mode. She was only surviving, looking to survive day after day until she got to that point when she could be happy. And I have to tell you, that was something that so connected with me. And it was something that caused me to drink. Backing up, I've talked about my childhood quite a bit. I was totally in survival mode. And I'm aware of that I didn't have a lot of support at home. I definitely didn't have a lot of support at school. I had undiagnosed ADHD. I grew up poor in a pretty wealthy town. So in comparison to everybody else who had a mother and a father, I didn't. It felt like I was just surviving. And there's other people out there who had single family households, even in the community I lived in, who weren't just surviving, who got along with people just fine. But it was such a weight on my back. And what I had to deal with just getting day to day through school, it was like, I got to get through this day and get out just to survive each and every day. And I do that day after day after day after day. And it felt a little bit better after college. And after college, looking to be in radio and broadcasting where it didn't pay very much, and I wasn't making very much, so I had a meager abode. It felt like for years I was just surviving, thinking about when my big radio job breaks, then I'll be happy and things will be fine. And once I have money and once I'm thin and I'm in good shape, then I'll be happy. And not realizing that I was surviving day to day. When you have that feeling of survival, you need relief in some way. There was no way without some type of additional help or understanding that I wasn't going to turn to drugs or alcohol. I was going to need that to get through every single day of survival. There was a period of time in 2001 for about, 10 months? I think it was 10 months that I was sober. Let's check that. There was 10 months when I wasn't drinking, but I didn't replace it with anything. I didn't go to meetings. It wasn't part of my therapy. I just didn't drink. And it felt to me like crossing my legs in a way that was going to prevent me from peeing. That's how it felt every single day. And then a bump in the road came up. I broke up with a girlfriend and I was off to the races and I couldn't stop drinking again. What made it different was I got a therapist and I got a program and I got a crew around me who helped me. I couldn't do this myself. When I think about that survival mode, I think a lot about surviving is you do it alone. You don't ask for help. And that's the way it was for me. I didn't want somebody else to know that I wasn't what I wanted you to see, that you were going to find me to be a fraud. I couldn't go and ask somebody for help. Something bad would happen. I don't know, in the back of my head, you're going to call the police on me. I'm going to go to jail. I'm going to die. And what was really freeing is really learning that I didn't have to do this alone. I failed at a job about 10 years ago. I was there for about 3 months or whatever. And it was a job that wasn't with a great company. I didn't really care about what the business was. I got paid really well, but I didn't really care about what the business was. It bored me. And at the time, I didn't realize I had ADHD, so it was tough to concentrate on boring stuff that nobody was going to teach me that I had to figure out for myself. In the end, I failed at that job. And I didn't want to ask for help there because I didn't want them to realize I was a fraud, because then they were going to fire me. Well, I got fired anyways. So I could have gone out swinging by asking for help, maybe even been successful. I wasn't going to be successful, but I had to learn how to ask for help. Before getting sober in my next job, I learned to be a lot more humble. And lo and behold, I got a lot of respect from people because I asked when I didn't know. I didn't wait to raise my hand. It was a couple of years before getting sober, but it gave me that practice to get sober. Because when I went to AA meetings, I had the opportunity to ask people to help me. And I could also find some things that were going to help me get sober, like steps. And I listened to other people who were kind of in that survival mode, just like me. And what they did to get through it was they drank or they used drugs, just like me. And I compare myself to other people because I didn't think I was as bad. I didn't have a DUI. I wasn't homeless. I didn't fall into an ER with blood pouring out of my ass, my elbow, my nose, my ears. And there are people I know who were like that. But I was just as dysfunctional. As a matter of fact, I think I probably had it worse because I was using so much effort to hold myself together while also drinking at the same time, thinking that was the thing that was holding me together, but through sheer force of will would do things to make sure everything held itself together so that I could continue to drink, because I couldn't think beyond. The only thing that made me feel somewhat normal and took the valve off was alcohol consumption. That was it. And if you have that type of mindset, there's no way of looking and saying, well, if I get rid of the alcohol, I can live happy, joyous, and free, because all you can think of is that's the only thing that holds me together. And if I'm not holding myself together with alcohol, there's no hope. There's nothing out there for me to hold myself together. But it turns out that wasn't the case. That really is being in survival mode. If you're in that place for years and years and years and years, and you can't feel normal, and the only way that you can feel somewhat normal is to have alcohol to get you through, that's nothing but survival. And that's really not good. I don't feel like I'm in survival mode anymore at times. I've learned a lot about how one of my biggest challenges is feeling my own weight. I've gotten feedback at work that I'm negative. Not negative of like, oh, this sucks. It's more of I talk myself down, that I'm not as good as that other person, Or, wow, I don't. So I'll give you an example here that I had to talk myself down on. This is some good survival mode. I met with somebody who does some video work at the company I work for. I am doing some video work in my job. I created the role. Nobody asked me to do it. I saw that there was a need to do this, and I learned Premiere Pro functionally. I learned the program, and I'm learning more Adobe products as I go. Nobody taught me. I didn't work another job, so I've got to kind of learn this on the fly while using it. I'm building the plane as we're flying. And I connected with somebody else in the company who does something similar, makes a lot of videos. And he came from working at NFL Films, working at a TV station in Florida. And the first thing I thought of is I'm just like sinking in my chair, like, oh, I'm less than. I'm never going to be as good as this guy because I don't have the background that he does. That's negative thinking. That's going into survival mode. No, that's the wrong answer. He had to learn somewhere. And I should look at it and say, wow, this guy is in this job creating some videos. There's no reason I can't create the type of videos that he's making if I continue to learn and be open-minded. And I should feel pretty damn good that the content that I'm creating, people are noticing at high levels and saying, wow, that's really amazing. And I've been doing this job for less than a year, all being self-taught based on YouTube videos I saw, LinkedIn learning, and just getting a feel for myself of how to tell the story with video and learning a new product. Instead of looking at that negatively and say, I'm never going to be in a role greater than this, like this guy is, because he has all this background training. I've already ramped myself up pretty quickly in less than a year, and I should feel like a master of the universe. And naturally, that doesn't come. I look at this podcast and say, I know of so many other podcasts that have so much of a bigger audience. Why can't I have that? I must suck at this. In the end, if I'm helping you, regardless of the size of the audience, if I'm helping you and you're getting another day sober because you listen to this and you're the only one who's listening, then this podcast is super important and valuable because it's not about the audience. In the end, that's not why I did it. I do this podcast because I want to stay sober. That's really the secret here. If you get something out of this, that is great and I'm happy. But I realized this week I do this podcast because I want to stay sober. This is another outlet for me to practice my recovery. I can talk to you. I can get my stuff out, sometimes getting feedback in email or on Instagram. And there's that two-way thing of somebody's connecting and saying, yeah, that really meant a lot to me. But in the end, I do this to stay sober. It's like the people who sponsor. They don't sponsor because they are altruistic and just looking to help other people, although that's true. They sponsor people because it helps them stay sober. I go to meetings because I feel better and I stay sober. And if you get something out of it, that's terrific, but not necessarily the reason that I do that. So yeah, I do this to keep myself sober. I've been doing this since November of 2020. And so the fact that you click on the button and I get enough of that feedback, you helped keep me sober. And that's the reason I do it. It helps me look back and say, here are the things that I do add value with. And when I start to feel as though, even if I don't have all the things that other people have, or I don't feel I'm as light or as physically fit or as handsome as somebody else, or have as big of a house or the title or job, that doesn't really matter. It's what's the values that I bring. And in reality, do most people look and say, oh, tell me about the size of your house and your square footage. If it doesn't meet a certain requirement, I'm not going to talk to you. No, that's stupid. So I have to talk it out loud. And when you start feeling that way, And you start getting past, well, we had these money woes, but we seem to figure this out every couple of weeks when the paychecks come in. And even when there are bills that we can't figure out how we're going to pay, we find a way to pay them. Maybe survival mode at a certain point is just an old idea that we cling on to. For me, some of those old ideas that cause me stress are there because it's always been. And if I ramp myself up, it's a comfortable feeling, even if it's caustic and negative. And it's like a warm hug, like alcohol. Alcohol is a warm hug. It's a caustic warm hug, but it's what we know. And the fear of letting that go and relying on something different is hard to accept. You have to grieve that. So for me, I'm realizing these negative thoughts I have about myself where I'm not as good of, where I talk down my own abilities, are just something I've held on to. And I'm afraid to let it go because, well, then I'm going to be an egomaniac. Is that likely? No. But I'm okay. I'm okay where I am. The people who might look at my 2009 Accord, which is in good functional shape, and say, I'm never going to talk to you, I'm writing you off. Is it really worth spending time with those people? That's a small fraction of people, where most people don't really care what you drive or what you have. It's about how do you make them feel? And I'm pretty good at that. I'm a good listener, mostly because I don't much like to talk. That fear of people. So because I get social anxiety, what I have as a strength is I'm good at asking you a lot of questions about you and getting you going to have you talk. And then I can catch my breath. And then I can think of something witty to say after that. Regardless of what my physical appearance and whatever I carry in my wallet, if I can treat you in a way that makes you feel better about you, that's going to help me be liked, help me be appreciated. And it helps me realize I'm not in survival mode anymore. I don't have to just survive. I can thrive. And that's the place I really want to be. I don't want to just get through. It's sort of like when you first stop drinking, getting through day after day, one day at a time. I've been sober closing on 11 years. I'm not concerned I'm going to drink today. It's possible. It's possible there will be a trigger out of nowhere, but I have the tools to go back into one day at a time mode if I need to. But I don't want to survive. I don't want to feel like my sobriety is just surviving. I'm kind of past that I have the habits where I don't think about drinking most of the time. I want to do something more with my sobriety. I want to help other people. I want to get more tools in my life so that I have a better life, a life that's more based on service, pushing against where I'm deathly afraid, and then getting past that hurdle. That's the place I want to be. And you realize, you hear people talk about living in survival mode, that you can live a thriving lifestyle. And that's a different mindset to be in. I'd really love to hear what you think about this. How does it resonate with you around survival mode? Have you felt like you were only surviving until you got to the place that you wanted to be? Did this end when you get sober, or did this continue? Is it something that you've never considered at all? And that hearing it from me today is something that hits upon you now. How does it feel? What have you learned if you're in a 12-step group or therapy, or however you chose to get sober? You always can reach out to me at soberfriendspod.com on Instagram. The email is matt@soberfriendspod. or my website, soberfriendspod.com. All right, we'll do another topic in the future. Always looking to see what you want us to talk about, so reach out. Until then, we'll see you next week. Bye, everybody. You made it this far into the podcast. That tells me you're a pretty big fan. If you like what we do and you find value in the podcast, consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/soberfriendspod. Your donation keeps us on the air to help out the new guy and helps us defray some of our costs. If you find value in our podcast, please consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/soberfriendspod.